It all starts with Vic Van Allen, who after biking through the city and the forest, returns home where his wife named Melinda tenderly watches him from the stairs. Later, as her parents prepare to leave, we meet their daughter Trixie, someone who loves to play the same song on loop at full volume, so much so that Melinda forbids her from playing it again. When the babysitter named Chelsea arrives, Melinda calls Vic to her room to advise her on what dress to wear. She takes his advice and chooses to wear the shoes Vic bought her, and he even puts them on her as if he were her dear. Their love is evident in every gesture, like when she caresses him while he drives halfway. Thus we see them arrive at a party, where upon seeing their friends, they discuss their decision to let Trixie choose a public school, and they are not concerned about her future college attendance. But in the middle of all this, as Vic and Melinda walk away, he watches as his little wife runs into the arms of a man named Joel Dash, who's just arrived. Vic isn't pleased, but he decides to stay calm and just observes from a distance as Melinda and Joel leave the house to get away from the crowd. And then in a dim spot, they proceed to exchange fluids as they mix their tongues. And even though Melinda realizes that her husband is watching them, she decides to keep on kissing Joel. The scene prompts Vic to decide to walk away, and so he quickly catches the eye of Mary Washington, who, seeing how Melinda rubs her body against Joel's in front of everyone, points out that they appear to be very good friends from the past. At that moment, Melinda suggests to Vic to dance, but he refuses, claiming it would ruin his night. And while she and Joel vanish again, Mary asks Vic if he's aware that his wife and Joel are fornicating. He claims that they're just friends, but when Mary tells him that everyone there is aware of his horns, he explains that he still loves Melinda despite it all. Their conversation is interrupted when they warn him that Melinda's strand is dancing on the piano in the house. Seeing him arrive, Melinda decides to play a song in his honor while everyone around her laughs at Vic for being a conscious cuckold. After this, Joel approaches Vic to thank him for the hospitality he and Melinda provided and commend him on the composure he shows on the outside, despite seeing how he eats his wife. Vic responds by telling him about how a man named Martin started seeing his wife just like he does now, and that went on for a while until he disappeared because he killed him. Joel thinks it's a joke because as far as he knows, Martin was a family friend. However, Vic makes it clear that Martin was only friends with his wife and not his. Joel knows he's a threat, and despite saying he doesn't believe him, we see that he decides to leave the party shortly after, despite Melinda asking him to stay. As the party ends, while she's leaving and Melinda can barely stand from all the alcohol she consumed, she asks him what he said to Joel. Vic promises he kept his distance, but she knows he's lying because she saw them talking before his change of attitude. On the way home, Melinda shows her love again by sharing the apple she found in the car. Back home, while Vic sends the nanny away, Melinda pays her no attention as she takes off her top to make something to wake her up. Then, when they are alone, Vic helps her undress completely by removing her dress. While giving her a massage, Vic questions her about choosing a fool like Joel. Melinda makes it clear to him that she knows Vic chose her for more than just her lack of intelligence. And while Joel is indeed a fool, he makes her enjoy life, not like him. After the massage ends, Melinda kicks him out of her room, and we see that Vic arrives at his garage where he has a huge terrarium with insects and plants, among which snails stand out. The next day, Vic treats his little wife with a breakfast full of morning after pills. Or not, well, that's what I believe. Truthfully, I don't believe they're migraine pills. And then he watches his daughter Trixie demonstrate her genius by making a robot run with the energy of 3 potatoes. After this, Vic takes Trixie to school and everything goes normally, until a family friend named Maggie recognizes him and sarcastically scolds her for not asking for her help to hide the corpses that Vic kills. Vic explains that he only said it to scare Joel. Later, he meets with his friends, the brunette named Grant and Jonas, who, after expressing that everyone knows Joel hits Melinda hard, they ask Vic if he threatened him as the rumors say. Vic denies this, but then Grant advises him to control Melinda, because she flaunts her affairs in front of everyone without remorse, making him look like the cuckold of the year. The news reaches Melinda, and when she welcomes him into her house, she begins to berate him for joking about Martin's disappearance and for Joel leaving. She also demands that he apologize to Joel, and so she took the liberty to invite him to dinner. In this way, we see Joel arrives at her house with a smile. Vic welcomes him, saying that Melinda is not there and that he will take care of him while they're alone. Joel hesitates, but eventually gives in and enters. Rixie is curious about the guest, so Vic explains that he is a friend of her mother, just like Martin was. Soon, Melinda joins them for dinner, and when Joel mentions that he's going to New Mexico, she suggests visiting him someday, and then she tastes food from Joel's plate. He tries the food on Joel's plate since he says he doesn't like the lobster chowder Vic cooked. Seeing this, Vic remembers that on their first date, Melinda ordered children's food because of her peculiar palate. She notes that Vic felt embarrassed at the time, but he makes it clear that he only realized he was making room for alcohol. After an awkward silence, Melinda mentions that Vic doesn't drink, which she sometimes thinks isn't normal, but Vic warns her that if he were normal, Joel wouldn't be sitting at his table. Joel decides to escape the tension by running to the bathroom, and meanwhile Melinda gets rid of Vic by making him give her daughter bedtime stories while we see her dancing with Joel. Seeing this, Vic shows his displeasure by breaking a plate. Melinda asks him to go rest because she will clean up the next day, and since Vic says he is not tired, she has him bring Joel a drink. Once alone, Joel asks Vic does not intend to apologize, but he assures him that he killed Martin with a hammer, and before saying anything more, Vic orders an Uber for Joel to leave, and since he's scared to death, he leaves right away. Following this, we see them attending a party where they meet a writer named Don Wilson, a storyteller and scriptwriter who hopes that his stories will soon make it to Hollywood. Vic shares that he designs apps and publishes a magazine with photographs and poetry, as he's actually retired thanks to the fortune he made from inventing a chip that assists military drones in finding their targets. Hearing this, Don questions the morality of Vic's invention, since he knows that many innocents die in wars due to drone strikes. Grant steps in to remind him that Vic is filthy rich, but then Don recognizes him as the alleged killer of Martin. Then, when Vic sees Melinda dancing with her daughter, he decides to do the same and asks Kelly Wilson to dance, which not only catches the attention of her friends, Grant and Jonas, but also of Melinda and her friends who'd never seen Vic dance. On the way home, Melinda mentions to Vic that she looked adorable when she danced with Kelly. He agrees that it was fun and that she's attractive, then Melinda asks if he wants to sleep with Kelly. Being cornered, Vic admits that for a moment he thought about what it would be like to sleep with the blonde. As a reaction, Melinda decides to go downstairs to polish her husband's sword, but when she realizes that Kelly could do it better than her, Melinda gets angry and ends the massage. However, when they get home, their hormones act and they proceed to finish what they started, but this time Vic adopts the role of a suckling male. The next day they attend Trixie's football match, and while Melinda gets furious because her daughter's rivals appear to be older, Vic receives a call from the bank, informing him that the Melinda's account didn't have enough funds to pay a check she wrote to some guy, Charlie Delisle, for a total of a modest $3,000 for piano lessons. Vic decides to add funds to his account so as not to alert his wife, and then while he's working, he starts investigating Charlie's name, and thus he ends up at the bar where this young pianist works nights. That night, while he's watching from a corner, Melinda shows up, becoming Charlie's inspiration. Seeing this, Vic goes home and discovers that Melinda left her ring before she left, and then sees on TV that Martin's body was found mutilated by criminals. Hours later, when Melinda returns, Vic asks her about her night. She explains that it was magnificent, as she didn't drink and so on, and she can't remember everything with the new friend. Vic pushes this aside to tell her that Martin was found dead. Without response, Melinda goes to her room to cry. In the morning, Vic takes Trixie to the vet where they adopt a dog. Upon returning, he sees Charlie with a bouquet of flowers on the street, and when he gets home, he finds the same flowers on his table. Here, when Melinda rips up Trixie's song and leaves, he takes the opportunity to throw his own flowers in the garbage. Later at the lovers' bar, Grant expresses his joy that the police have caught Martin's killer, so there will be no more rumors. Vic sees Charlie passing by, congratulates him on the music, and then tells Grant that Charlie is Melinda's teacher. After such a busy day, Vic retreats to his garage to water his snails. He ponders over Melinda. Meanwhile, Melinda and Charlie are giving themselves massages while driving. His wife does not return home that night, so Vic can't sleep and wakes up early. Even after checking her room later on, he can't find her. With no other choices, he waits until hours later when Melinda finally walks through the door. He immediately demands to know why she wrote Charlie a check, but she refuses to answer. Vic then points out that she's drunk and that makes her unattractive. Melinda thinks he's jealous and makes it clear that if he wants to know, she'll tell him in detail how Charlie pleasures her and makes them both spill their fluids on each other. She even offers to show him the bruise he left on her because of his sudden movements. Vic reminds her that they have a daughter and forbids her to see Charlie again. But Melinda isn't afraid of him, as she knows that Vic is weak and won't divorce her. She then proceeds to lick her husband's fingers as she challenges him to beat her on the stairs. But Vic rejects her and she accuses him of lacking passion or love for her. Vic makes it clear that he does love her, and then demands to know if she's in love with Charlie. But Melinda only responds that if another woman were his wife, he'd be bored to suicide. After that, we see that they attend another party where Charlie, another one of his friends, arrives. and without caring that Vic is in front of him, he treats his wife as a playmate. So she introduces him as her friend and teacher to her other friends. And while Melinda dances to Charlie's music, Vic observes motionless. This prompts her to approach her husband to surreptitiously cause him trouble. Then when Melinda formally introduces them, Vic stares at him, and although Charlie almost recognizes him, he assures her they had never met. As night falls, Vic loses sight of Melinda, and during his search, he reunites with Mary, who reveals that his wife is in one of the rooms upstairs. Vic immediately follows her instructions and observes Melinda and Charlie leaving one of the rooms almost without clothes. Even so, Vic stays on the sidelines while these two have fun in the pool together. Suddenly it starts raining, and this makes everyone leave the pool except for Vic and Charlie. Moments later, Vic joins the others, and while everyone is dancing inside, we see Charlie's body floating motionless in the water. Here Mary approaches Vic to express her surprise at seeing him dance with Kelly, and suggests in an insinuating way that next time he should take her dancing. On her part, Melinda soon notices Charlie's absence, and when she looks around the house, she ends up discovering the body swimming with the fish. Immediately, the men, including Vic, jump into the water to get him out, but being very heavy and wet, he slips from their hands, causing his head to hit the concrete. Without thinking, Vic tries to revive him with CPR. Seeing that Charlie doesn't react, Melinda accuses her husband and the others of not performing the maneuver correctly. Later, while the police are investigating the scene and removing the body, Detective Clark starts questioning upstairs without getting anywhere. It's not until Melinda accuses Vic of killing Charlie that they discover the magical herbs being used. This leads to her being taken outside to give a separate statement with Chief Nichols, while Clark continues to question the rest inside. Here the men tell him that they all helped pull Charlie out of the water, and it was Don who slipped. They assured that this incident had no impact on his death as he died from drowning. In the midst of this, Vic is summoned by Nichols, who asks him directly in private if Melinda slept with Charlie. Vic claims he has no idea because he never asked his wife. Nichols doesn't understand this, so Vic explains that he doesn't need to control Melinda's decisions since he accepts her as she is. Nichols reminds him that she accused him of manslaughter, so he asks if he killed Charlie, but Vic tells him how he broke into Grant's back house and burned his fingers in the kitchen. As it all ends and the detectives leave, Melinda tells Vic in front of her friends that she wishes her husband had drowned instead of Charlie. On the way, as Vic drives, she retaliates by hitting him. At his house, when she calms down, Vic asks her if she wants a divorce and if she's scared, thinking he killed Charlie. Melinda realizes she shouldn't be afraid of him because she's the reason for his crimes. At dawn, Vic goes for his bike ride like he does every day. But this time he remembers forcing Charlie to drown. How he found the courage to do it by imagining Charlie sleeping with his wife. When the memory ends and Vic looks around, he sees someone following him. When Vic drops Trixie off at school, she is intercepted by Kelly, who reveals that her husband Don was gossiping behind Vic's back and inviting Melinda to his house to talk about how they think he killed Charlie. Vic relieves any guilt he might feel and invites both Don and himself to dinner at his place. We see that they come punctually, and while the women entertain themselves in the kitchen, Vic shows Don his terrarium. Don advises him to stop accusing him of murder since it will affect his and Kelly's reputations. Asks him how he thinks Charlie died, and as Vic maintains it was an accident, the old man directly accuses him of being responsible. Vic reminds him that it was also said that he had killed Martin, but that turned out to be false. However, Don knows that Vic was enjoying the active rumor at the time, so he proposes using a lie detector while questioning him. And though he didn't expect it, Vic agrees immediately. The next day, while walking through the city, Vic spots the car that was following him again. As it's parked, he looks through the window and finds out that the owner has cameras. Few steps later, he finds out that the owner is a man named David Ricciagliani, who is having breakfast with Melinda. Left with no other options, she introduces Vic as an entrepreneur looking to open a psychiatric practice. Vic uses the opportunity to ask the professional in front of him if Melinda is schizophrenic. She responds by asking if Vic is a psychopath for saying that or just an idiot. With that, Vic leaves, but not before asking David for a business card. But he says he doesn't have any on him with Fermano, revealing that he's a private detective. Without wasting any time, Vic barges into Don's house to confront him about hiring David Ricciagliani. Don insists that he doesn't know who that is. But then Vic shows him the invoice where Melinda transferred half of the detective's payment to Don's account. Out of options, Don accepts but refuses to apologize, so Kelly does it for him. Soon after, Vic decides to follow Melinda, discovering her new lover, a rich man named Tony Cameron. But just like other times, he stays on the sidelines, just observing for now. Once back home, as Vic is about to bath Trixie, she accuses him of murdering Charlie and trying to trick her by denying it. She also tells him about people constantly asking her whether it happened or not. Then Vic reassures her, if had he killed someone, he would be in jail. But giving in to Trixie's insistence, Vic agrees, promising to keep it a secret. Afterwards, Vic observes his wife chatting with someone in a pleasant manner from above, which makes him on verge of exploding. But he manages to keep his temper cool and silent as always. He chooses to interrupt his bath to ask her about her evening, only for Melinda to refuse to speak to him, proceeding to shave her intimate parts with her back turned towards him. Vic decides to return to acting and invites Tony to his house, where he first meets him alone in his garage to show him his snails. Once inside, while Vic cooks, Tony tells him that he works building sustainable homes in several countries, aiming to create a sustainable world for future generations. When Melinda arrives, she throws herself into his arms in happiness and unabashedly reveals to Vic that Tony was the first friend she slept with. Tony expects a backlash, but Melinda and her husband explain that Vic doesn't try to control her like a normal person would. Then Tony suggests cooking some of his snails, and although Vic warns him that they are not bred for that, when Melinda orders Tony to go fetch them, Vic interrupts to explain that an edible snail must go through a fasting period so as not to be toxic. The day continues, and the only one that's prepared to eat is Vic, as his wife and Tony keep themselves occupied by floating their bodies while they dance. And when the sexual tension hits its peak, she decides to take her friend to her room, and even though Vic tries to watch, he's quickly found by Melinda. So he leaves them alone so Tony can freely sleep with his wife. But the next day he decides to ambush him in public, telling him that Melinda wants to show him some land, and in doing so convincing Tony to go with him. On their journey, Vic asks him why he broke it off with Melinda previously, but Tony claims he doesn't remember. Out of the blue, Vic speeds off into the woods, demanding to know if he plans to stay in town for long. Tony tries to call Melinda, but there's no signal in the area, and moments later they finally arrive at the location. Here, Vic uses the distraction to strike him with a stone in the face, and continues to shove him down the ravine, resulting in the body suffering multiple injuries until he loses his life. Upon reaching the body, Vic confirms it has turned into a ham, so he ties rocks to it to sink it in the river. When he returns to Melinda, he asks about Tony, claiming he likes his new friend. Then, while toasting with his daughter, Melinda fails trying to talk to Tony, so she asks Vic if he saw him, but he claims ignorance about his friend. Everything goes smoothly until Melinda and her daughter decide to have a picnic in the woods. Here, Melinda expresses her happiness because among all the men in her life, Vic is the only one who tolerates all her infidelities and stays by her side. In gratitude, she gets her husband to please her by inserting his fingers. Vic responds by giving her the latest edition of his photography book, which is based on her. The romantic moment is interrupted when Vic notices that Trixie is close to the water, so he steers her away so she does not discover Tony's body. On the way home, Melinda notices she's forgotten her scarf in the woods, so Vic offers to get it the next day to keep her away. At home, Vic discovers Melinda was talking to Don, but to assure him there's nothing to worry about, she asks him to spend the night. When they're face to face, she tells him she loves him, which triggers a passionate encounter. At dawn, while Vic goes for the scarf, Melinda searches for him in the garage where she accidentally runs over one of his snails, but in so doing, discovers Vic was hiding Tony's wallet. Once in the woods, Vic confirms that Tony's body is still there, but won't sink. Not knowing he's being watched, he pushes the body down with a branch. Don is watching him. When Don decides to make his presence known, Vic excuses himself, saying he's looking for Melinda's scarf, which we see was found by Don. Vic tries to stay calm, but Tony's floating hand gives away his location to Don, who now tries to flee to rat him out to the police. With no options left, Vic starts a bike chase after Don's car. While we see that Melinda is packing up her stuff, Vic realizes that he won't be able to reach him, so he takes a shortcut through the woods, and on his side, Don tries to send a message with the truth to Kelly, but the car's maneuvers cause him to lose his phone. Moments later, when he distracts himself looking for it, we see Vic falls in front of him, so to avoid running him over, Don changes direction, but this sends him down the ravine into the river. Having done this, Vic returns to his home as if nothing has happened. At the same time, Trixie finds her mom's suitcase, but decides to support Vic, throwing Melinda's things into the pool, because when she discovers this, she makes it clear to her that she doesn't want to leave her home. Once at home, Melinda greets him with a smile and goes to her room telling him that she saw Tony, while we see she decided to incinerate her late friend's ID, opting for Vic over all her lovers.